This panel discussion is on the management of newly diagnosed hormone sensitive or naive metastatic prostate cancer. As we all know, is one of the most common presentation of prostate cancer is metastasis, and those who present in metastasis for the first time, they are hormone sensitive. How to identify a hormone sensitive or hormone naive versus a castrate resistant prostate cancer? This is the first thing which comes to our mind. Dodul, I would like to ask you, can you just tell our audience how do we identify a hormone sensitive or hormone naive versus how do we identify resistant prostate cancer?
So, hormone sensitivity is like when the level of testosterone is adequate in the normal range, so newly diagnosed or even after progression, the testosterone level is more than 50 nanogram per ml, and the patient might have been treated with uh, ADT earlier, but still on progression, the testosterone level is more than 50. And CRPC is again, it's like the disease has to progress either radiologically or biochemically, and the level of testosterone has to be in the range of castration. So the testosterone level should be below 50, and there has to be progression. That can be uh, from the previous treatment. The patient might have been treated with ADT or not, but there is a progression, and then the level of testosterone is within castration range.
Yes, very well said.
Dr. Sham, even just for the PGs, very well said. Even for the CRPC, clinical examination is also very important. Symptoms are increasing because PGs, they are seeing patient in our OPDs, and we should not ignore even the symptoms of this patient along with the radiological and biochemical progression.
Yes, well taken. So that means in case of CRPC, castrate resistant prostate cancer, even though the testosterone level is within the castrate level less than 50, but there is a progression of disease whether radiologically, biochemically, or symptomatically.
Yeah. The
Yes.
symptoms has not to be ignored. That's
So, Dr. Manoj, can you tell our audience what is the castrate level of testosterone, and what do you follow in your day-to-day practice, and what are the castrate level of testosterone after the orchidectomy versus after the ADT or hormone therapy? Any comment, any light on this
I
topic?
think the universally accepted it is less than 50 nanogram per deciliters, and but some of the people try to achieve less than 20, that is equivalent to the surgical castration. And one thing is very clear that if we do not achieve the nadir in the testosterone level in the first year, it may lead to the poor prognosis. So the if we achieve the testosterone level less than 20, that is very good. That is the our goal, but usually accepted is less than 50.
Yes. So the point taken here is the universal acceptance is 50, but after the castration, after the orchidectomy, the normally we see that levels are less than 20 and less
20.
than 50.
Yes.
Yeah. So that is, so we should try to achieve that level. Can anybody tell, is there any difference in the level of the testosterone with different ADTs? Like goserelin, pamorelin, or leuprolide, or antagonist. Any difference?
So I think there is a relationship between the type of ADT and the response or rate of fall in testosterone level. So when we use LHRH agonists, initially there will be a flare or surge in the level of testosterone, and on the contrary, when we use LHRH antagonist or anti-androgens, then there will be immediate fall in the level of testosterone.
Yes.
Yeah. Can I add something, Dr. Abhay?
Yes.
Hello, Dr.
Yes,
Pawan.
yes, please, sir.
Basically, nowadays there is a different techniques to test the testosterone level. When we want to test a free testosterone or binded protein testosterone, that has also got a difference. Now, the latest technique of chemoluminescent technique, if we judge, that is the best level which can provide the exact level of testosterone.
Yes, that's true. And the level different compositions. There was a phase 2 study which has seen that with the triptorelin, the neither is achieved the testosterone neither is achieved earlier as compared to other. But that is just a phase 2 study, maybe totally biased.
Or regarding the first question, I can also add.
Yes, please.
Latest now the latest paper when the after the invention of abiraterone and enzalutamide, they are taking the basically a surgical orchidectomy level. 20 is the now they are taking as not the 51.
Yes, agreed. The 10-20 is
Although NCCN guidelines still they are recommending 50, but yes,
50.
Recent literature and recent trials they are going up to 20. Maybe the new guidelines may recommend 20, but agree with the new criteria that is going.
Both, can I add something?
yes.
Yeah.
There is a recent consensus guideline from European organizations,
European urology.
urologists, and they have written very clearly that as of now, for all practical purpose, the standard remains 50. Although there is relationship between 20 where you will find better outcome, but 50 is as of now the standard.
Yes.
And that is also, even NCCN also says the similar thing.
Yes. There have been a PR7 trial. The secondary analysis shows if there is a neither testosterone level, that means less than 20 achieved within the first year, and the prognosis is better. And those patients, they have a later achievement of CRPC as compared to who could not achieve less than 20 levels. And in day-to-day practice, we see with the ADTs, we can easily achieve the level of less than 20, even less than 10 also. So my next question to Dr. Praveen Alawat is, what are the possible mechanisms of CRPC? And secondly, should the ADT be used still in case of castrate-resistant prostate cancer?
Prostate cancer is responsive to ADT therapy. Most patients will respond, 90% patients will respond, but eventually most of them will have become unresponsive to ADT. There are many mechanisms proposed, although it is not clear why it happens. From some of the mechanisms are there are many enzymes involved in this steroidogenesis. The enzymes itself are overexpressed in prostate cells. Plus, also overexpression happens with the androgen receptors also. So what happens is the blood serum level is low, but within the prostate cancer cells, the level of testosterone is still high. So there are many more mechanisms are involved. For example, there are some gene mutations happening in androgen receptors, and there are signal changing happening in receptors. So there are many factors. But the important thing is we need to, even the CRPC patient, we need to bring down to the castration level, and we need to give ADT also, even in CRPC.
It is a genomic era is this, and definitely autophagy and other insulin-like factors, and we are now able to look into the depth why there is some resistance is there, and all those genes are involved, autophagy and others.
Yes, so Praveen and Meenu, they have very beautifully explained the mechanisms of ADD resistance. One of the most common is the androgen receptor infidelity. Earlier, it was only faithful to the androgen, testosterone. Now it become sensitive to other steroids also,
Yeah.
and even to the antagonists. And hyper-responsiveness, gene amplifications are the other factors. So the take-home message is ADT should be used even if the patient is CRPC to maintain the castrate level of testosterone. So we have got two cases here. On the extreme left, on the left side is a 72-year-old newly diagnosed patient, hormone sensitive prostate cancer. He presented on a routine health checkup. His PSA was raised. So he underwent, after evaluation, an MRI. You can see on the left side peripheral, there is hypointensity on T2. And he underwent a PSMA PET. He was diagnosed with a T3A N0M1 D10 metastasis, which is not going to the cord. As you can see, initial PSA was 35 at Gleason's 4+3, and life expectancy is a very fit 72 with more than 5 years with no comorbidities. On the extreme right, we have a patient, a 66-year-old, with a performance of 80 and T2N1 prostate cancer with M1, including the nodes, bones, non-regional nodes, bones, and liver, with IPSS score of moderate LUTS, initial PSA 326, and a Gleason's 4+4, and life expectancy more than 5 according to his symptomology, and no comorbidities. What are the baseline investigations or evaluations which we are going to do in case of a newly diagnosed hormone sensitive prostate cancer? Anybody can take this question.
Again, I am coming to the basic workup is very important. Basic clinical examination, your distal examination, and I think you have already, if that is the case, biopsy has to be done, and PSA level, even the serum testosterone is also, because in most of the cases, once we are getting the referral also, testosterone is not a routine in practice. People are doing, the PSA is raised, then radiological and bone scan is mandatory in case of we can't avoid bones then scan. That's my perspective. And all this CT scan, and we will talk of the plasma PET, and that is different issue, but bone scan has to be there along with the CT thorax or abdominal pelvis, MRI pelvis.
Okay. So many cases like
Can I add one or two things in addition to that? So because this is a metastatic cancer, and many of them and all of them will definitely receive androgen therapy or androgen deprivation therapy. So bone mineral density and perhaps serum vitamin D3 also very
I
important.
agree, definitely. These are the, because the later side effects of the ATT, and it's better to do at the baseline, like we are doing in breast cases before starting the hormone. And it should be the routine practice to go for this.
We could also think some
Actually,
cardiac
this is the
evolution.
problem. If we compare the female versus male population, and all over the country, females are, they are more osteoporotic. Even in the breast cases, that is mandatory. Your point is well set. Even because of the other nutrition issues and others, still we can't clear the men population with the bone density. But I think that has to be done very good, very nicely said. It has to be added.
and in the case where the disease was on D10 vertebra, if it is close to MRI spine, would like to do the MRI spine also to rule out any proximity to the cord and canal. If it is,
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yep.
and
Uh,
regarding the MRI of the prostate, we have seen a couple of patients where they are having a very high IPSS score, or even moderate to severe. Sometimes the disease might be close to the periurethral complex. It might be pressing. So those patients, even with ADT within or with treatment, their symptom doesn't resolve. After completing the treatment, also they don't resolve. So those patients may be a candidate for a future or sometime TURP. So MRI, what do you think on MRI can be done also in such cases? MRI of the
Yes, of course.
Right. Yes, of course.
yes. So now
The question is that in a metastatic case, whether we should go for MRI pelvis or not.
yeah, in cases of like yes, so in metastatic should we go, or in all
Not.
metastatic, or only with having the symptoms of severe LUTS?
No, I think
Yes.
the MRI has to be selective, like as you said
Has
very
to be selective, yes.
accurately, that there is some suspicion of median lobe going into the urethra, or you are having a deposit near the spinal cord. And those are definitely patients who should be evaluated with MRI as well.
Yes.
And also there are sometimes the bony lesions are also better characterized by MRI with different sequences.
In fact, in some cases where PSA is very high and diseases will be expecting multiple meds, we can even avoid PSMA also. We can go ahead with only CT scan and bone scan. And in fact, if PSA is very low, then we should use the PSMA more often to identify the oligometastatic disease.
Yes, sir. That's right. So now regarding when we see a case, what is the philosophy in our mind? What should which is going to help in decision making in a new case or newly metastatic? So I would like to ask Dr. B.K. Mishra sir, what should be the philosophy in such cases where there is a metastatic newly diagnosed case? What are the things, or what are the broad fundamentals which helps in making the
I
decision?
think there's multiple things we need to know. That first is the disease extent. It is the oligometastatic or advanced disease. Like many trials, the disease is divided like a high burden disease on the basis of bony metastasis, which is outside the 4 or more and more than pelvis, and visceral metastasis. Then second, the various comorbidities like maybe cardiac diabetes, history of seizures. Then one more thing that like you say, life expectancy also. These things should be kept in mind before deciding the what is the agent we used in the this HSPC of setting.
Yes, sir.
I want to add one thing, Dr. Wist.
Yes,
I
yes.
think patient's choice of treatment, whether patient wants IV treatment or the oral administration of the drug, this must also be considered into while deciding the management.
Yes, yes. So the broadly, I would like to summarize what our panelists have told, that a life expectancy and a performance status of the patient, the quantum of disease, which will help in differentiating whether it is a high burden versus a low burden disease, high risk versus a low risk disease, or oligometastatic setting. The visceral crisis is there. Severity of symptoms, whether local symptoms, LUTS, whether there is a metastatic bone pain, cord compression, and the aggressiveness of the disease, how aggressive the disease is, and the tolerability of the patient to treatment, which includes the comorbidities, cardiac status, his brain status, whether the patient has a history of seizure, and a liver status. So point well taken. So Dr. Surabhi, how would you like to quantify in both cases, on the extreme left and extreme right, with the different quantification criteria?
Dr. Wist, regarding the disease burden status, only 2 trials had mentioned regarding the burden of the disease. One was the charted trial, which has mentioned that the patient is counted as a high burden disease if the patient is having the visceral mets or plus having the more than 4 bone lesions, out of which more than one must be beyond the vertebral bodies or the pelvis. So this will be counted as the high burden disease. Apart from this, latitude has basically subcategorized patient according to low risk and high risk. High risk were those patients who are having 2 of the 3 criteria, patient having more than 3 bone disease, visceral mets, or the Gleason scoring equal or more than 8. So depending on these trials, we can categorize the patient according to the burden and the high risk.
So on the right side, it is a high risk or high burden.
High volume.
High volume disease.
That can be sent as a high volume disease, right side. and then the on the left side is oligomets. It's a low risk disease.
Low risk
Low.
disease.
Low risk or low
Low
volume?
volume disease.
Low volume.
Can I have some comments on this, please? Yeah, so thank you. So I think this is a PSMA PET CT scan.
Yes.
Now, none of these trials which have actually defined low volume versus high volume disease have utilized
Yes, you're right.
PSMA PET scan to define metastatic status.
Yes.
So PSMA PET CT scan or PSMA PET MR being a very sensitive test will definitely identify very subtle lesions which were perhaps would not have been detected with conventional imaging, which were utilized in those studies. So this is a fallacy. And if you see the guideline from European Association of Urologists, ESTRO and SIOD, they tell very clearly that if the PSMA PET CT scan detects more number of metastases, then also the patients should not be deprived of the benefit from adding radiation. So if the conventional imaging identifies it as low volume disease and PSMA identifies it as high volume disease, then also the patient should be given the benefit of radiation. It's just a comment.
Yes. So in this extreme right patient, he has a non-regional nodes. Apart from the whole vertebral column, he has a sternal metastasis. He has a liver deposit also. As you can see he has a liver. So I think
Yes.
with conventional radiography also, a CT scan and a bone scan, he would be classified, this patient would be classified in a high burden disease.
Dr. Bisht, just wanted to add sometime the terminology is also inconsistent, although it can be like high volume and multiple skeletal mets, but the skeletal fraction is actually low. So that's why the role of the plasma scan and other
Yes.
can add the value.
So there is a fallacy. So there is a fallacy in naming the burden, disease burden. Few trials they have used the high burden, like Latitude trial, they have used high risk or high burden, low burden. Some has used, like in Stampede, even the node negative and node negative, node positive, and node positive. So they have, so there was no criteria of high risk in the Stampede. In the Latitude trial and Chartered trial, they have used. So, and some are using a risk, some are using a volume, and there is no consensus among the oncologist what is the appropriate volume or appropriate dimension which will classify the disease as a high risk, low risk, or high volume, low volume. But these are arbitrarily taken in different trials. So now with these two patients, case 1 and case 2, I would like to ask Dr. Pawan, so what form of ADT we are going to choose if we are going to start with ADT, a surgical castration or LHRS agonist or antagonist or an anti-androgen, like calotype. So what form of ADT we are going to use in both these patients, and what would be the duration and whether you are going for an intermittent or a continuous ADT?
If we, Dr. Bish, if we go with the previous guidelines, it was the treatment of choice is only ADT in these patients. Surgical castration with including of calotype treatment, anti-androgens with that. So that, but now the latest, as we have already named the trial, Stampede, Stampede trial and other Chartered trial, Latitude, they have added some newer agents in these type of hormones. This patient is hormone sensitive, testosterone level is below castration level, then we should certainly add Abiraterone or other drugs, whichever is possible.
So
in our setup.
So in one patient which was the heavy burden disease with having a liver mets, bone met, and non-regional nodes, in that patient, would you like to go for a surgical castration? Because let's keep the patient money reserved for the another therapies, because this
sure. I will certainly, for the clinical scenario and our scenario, I will certainly go for this patient for surgical castration. So that
let me children.
Yes.
Countries with limited resources, our low-income countries, and surgical castration is equally effective with the other. There is no much difference with these various. So it can be chosen.
So all the
because the elderly patient, they were elderly patients were there.
In government hospital, where the financial constraint is the main problem for the treatment, we also prefer the surgical castration for this type of patient. Even nowadays,
the
subcapsular
consensus is-
orchiectomy is also being done.
Yes.
So which improve remove all the Leydig cell component of the testis, so it can be a better option for these patients.
So the panelists are having a consensus then on the heavy burden disease patient, we would go for a surgical castration. We will give the option of surgical castration.
Yes.
But what about the patient on the extreme left, which was having a single D10 deposit with a capsule confined disease? In that patient, would you counsel the patient for surgical castration, or you would like to go for the agonist and antagonist? Any take on this from the panelist?
I think same criteria is for whether it's a high burden disease or the low burden disease. Castration remains castration. If it is the financial issues or logistic issues are there, definitely we will offer a surgical castration to him also.
So that means
I think patient choice should be respected in
Yes,
both
yes.
cases.
Yes.
But again, in the first cases, there is an option of the, I think I should go ahead with non-surgical, because there may be rare chances of, for quality of life, we can offer some intermittent hormonal therapy also in first case. But second case, we should convince for surgical and medical, and we should respect the patient choice.
very well
I
said.
agree with Dr. B.K. Mishra.
Yes, yes.
But sir, for nowadays, intermittent ADT is not recommended. One should have the continuous ADT. You have seen that even there is a change in better overall survival if we are going with the continuous ADT. So we can't say ki on basis of that we can go for intermittent ADT, and we should offer the surgical castration.
So Dr. Manoj, I was coming to this question, whether any role of intermittent versus continuous ADT in case of metastatic hormone sensitive.
I don't think if we go by literature, definitely we should go for the continuous ADT.
So would there be any condition where would like to go offer the patient, or we would to agree with the patient that, okay, I will keep this patient on an intermittent ADT?
In my patient, definitely I will not.
Those patients who was very worried about side effects, some quality of life, erectile dysfunction, maybe they can be tried intermittent also, but by and large, the continuous should be
continuous.
Yes, yes. So both our panelists, they have just hit the nail. So there have been 3 meta-analysis. Although if you just clearly see in 3 meta-analysis in M1 NAIF patients, they have these meta-analysis, they have failed to show any significant survival difference. But at the same time, SWOG 9346, it said it ruled out any significant inferiority of the intermittent as compared to the continuous. That means even the intermediate cannot be better or at par with the continuous. So the first option would be to go for a continuous in case of metastatic. If there is a concern about quality of life, toxicity of ADT, significant toxicity, logistic, then it can be attempted intermittent, but the preference should be a continuous ADT.
Dr. Shyam, please try to conclude, and Dr. Subhas has also joined.
Okay.
I have joined previously, but there was no connection. I think there was some mic problem.
Okay.
So I was listening, yeah.
So I would like to hurry up. So now coming on to the androgen signaling targeted inhibitors, or ASI or ARIs, like abiraterone, enzalutamide, apalutamide. So Dr. Subhas, can you just briefly summarize the mechanism of action of both these abiraterone and enzalutamide to our audience, especially the DNs who are here?
So abiraterone is basically a 17 cyproterone 17 alpha hydroxylase inhibitor. So it just blocks the production of testosterone. While on the other side, enzalutamide and apalutamide block the androgen receptor, and there are 3 pathways, like they block the androgen receptor, or they block the transcription of this, or directly inhibits the receptor to entering the nucleus. So these are the 3 pathways which the enzalutamide and the apalutamide work, and the that abiraterone blocks the production of testosterone. So
Yes.
that is the mechanism by inhibiting the 17-alpha hydroxylase enzyme. Yeah.
Very well said. So can you also tell our audience what is the need of adding the steroid?
Because when we like when 17-alpha, when we inhibit 17-alpha hydroxylase, the mineralocorticoid activity is increased actually. So to counter that mineralocorticoid activity, we have to add the glucocorticoids like prednisolone.
Yes.
So that is the basic.
So now, Dr. Vinod, you are there? Dr. Vinod?
No, he is not able to join.
Oh, not able. Okay.
Try to conclude, please.
Yes. So I think last 1 or 2 slides. So after data from the last phase 3 trials, so in our cases, case 1 and case 2, Dr. Meenu, would you like to add anything extra apart from ADT, or would you like to go?
Yeah, we have seen the visceral metastasis also, but we have not discussed about the role of the docetaxel, and this can be another option. And all these trials, they have shown the benefit, survival benefit, and absolute survival benefit even more than 8%. Once we are adding although abiraterone or this docetaxel, especially in the high burden disease, and they have not shown any, although STEMPT trial, they have not substratified the various population.
Mean in case 1, like in case 1 and case 2, what in low burden and high burden, how do you start? ADT plus and ADT?
Abiraterone we can start because in the high burden, this is what these trials are telling, and we are also adding in our practice
If these
also.
patients are in your OPD, so you will start with abiraterone in case 1, and what about case 2, heavy burden disease? You would like to go for docetaxel?
Docetaxel can be the option, and even where the oligomets were there and low burden disease were there, one of the H arm of the STEMPT trial, why not to use the radiation also in this?
Yes, I agree. There is a Cochrane meta-analysis that abiraterone plus ADT is better than abiraterone is better than ADT alone. This is the recent meta-analysis. And abiraterone was given the FDA approval for high risk in STEMPT trial. So do you think the abiraterone will benefit even in the low risk patients? Anybody can take this question?
Yes, abiraterone benefit both in low risk as well as high risk.
High risk, both.
STEMPT trial, there was one arm of the G where they have taken the all type of the patient without stratifying into the low or high risk.
This is the article published in Urology. They have segregated the patient of STEMPT into high and low according to the latitude criteria, and they found both in low risk and high risk there was a benefit of adding abiraterone. And docetaxel, as our panelists have said, in case of high burden visceral crisis, they would go for a docetaxel, right? So if we have to choose between the abiraterone and docetaxel, what are the criteria to be followed? Dr. Mishra sir, can you just
again, the most important is we see in these cases comorbidities and burden of disease. Like docetaxel, we should prefer in the high burden disease, but same time old patients, we have chances of more febrile neutropenia and myelotoxicity. We should avoid docetaxel in this patient. Same time, with patient having diabetes, hyperglycemia, we can avoid the abiraterone basis, and also those patients who require frequent monitoring. Like abiraterone, we need to see the potassium and everything. So I think these patient comorbidities and logistic factors should also be kept in mind before choosing any treatment in these settings.
Yeah. So the point is we have to look at the toxicity profile of both these drugs before prescribing. So and this was the stopgap systemic review, which has given the first option as abiraterone, second as docetaxel. So Dr. Praveen, do you see any future of adding something extra to standard to docetaxel, abiraterone, and to ADT?
I'm not sure if any recent data we have, but yes, there are ongoing trials where they are combining two of the agent, one docetaxel and one of the anti-androgen, maybe abiraterone or something else. So yes, in future maybe we will have a combination of these both of these drugs.
I can add something, Dr. Base. There's a one trial which has approval has been closed, the peace trial.
Yep,
Approval
this
has
one.
been closed. They have combined ADT with docetaxel. In one arm they are comparing ADT with docetaxel with abiraterone. In third arm they are comparing ADT with docetaxel plus RT. And then the fourth arm ADT, docetaxel plus abiraterone plus radiotherapy. This approval has been closed in 2018. Maybe year last or next year, the result will be published after having a 3 years data.
I think they've added RT with abiraterone.
They have added RT with abiraterone also. They have added RT with ADT, docetaxel, and with RT.
Yes.
Yes.
And there was one trial showing the sequencing of the docetaxel to be given before the abiraterone, because the efficacy they have seen that has been affected if it is used after the abiraterone.
So in your data set, actually, you would like to go for, in case of hormone sensitive, abiraterone first or enzalutamide first. If the patient is having a liver failure or cardiac issues, right, and is not in the viscous crisis and is not a candidate for docetaxel, would you like to start with enzalutamide, or you will still like to go for ADT alone or ADT plus abiraterone? Like,
Dr. Wist, enzalutamide may be given in the low risk patients if the patient is having some hepatic toxicity, but patient must not be having the visceral mets. It has shown role in the lower risk disease.
yes. And secondly, if there is a history of seizure, then we will not go for enzalutamide.
Definitely. Because
Enzalutamide.
syncope is the
Yes.
History of seizure or history of falls also.
Yes. So last question to our panelist: any role of radiation in these two cases, low versus high burden disease? Any evidence for it?
In the
I
first
can
place,
take
there
it.
was
Horrid trial and STEMT HM, they have shown the benefit of adding the radiation to especially low burden cases, hypofractionated radiation.
And Praveen, you
There
would
are-
like to add something?
I can add, Dr. Brish, there are two trials basically, Stampede trial and HORAD trials. They have added RT in, but the RT dose in those trials, some hypofractionation dose and conventional dose was 70 gray only in HORAD trials. That's why I tell we have to wait for the peace trial, which is upcoming result will tell the exact dose. Peace
in
trial has used
Stampede,
70 gray.
in Stampede, they used 6 into 6.
50,
There are
54,
36 gray and 6
55 to
fraction.
20 gray.
36
54
and
in
6
20.
weeks.
Of
In
55
Stampede,
and 20 fraction.
In
Yeah,
Stampede, they were
Stampede trials, they've
two
used
ways.
36 and 6.
Stampede
Yeah.
trial had two different dose fractionation. One
Yes.
was 55 in 20 and the other one was 36 in 6.
36 and 6 gray. 6 fractions, yes.
Dodol, any quick take on SBRT for oligometastasis CA prostate?
No, Shyam, this is not the question for this panel discussion. Please keep it
This
for
is in the
next time.
next one.
Okay.
Next.
So I think any role of bone modifying agents like Exeva or denosumab?
Yes.
I think there is
Hormones,
no role
yeah.
at present.
No role.
I think we have a very important question left. That is, what should be the sequence if we are giving radiation locally in the metastatic cases? Whether we should go upfront or after giving chemotherapy.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Manoj, for suggesting topic for panel discussion in next meeting. Dr. Shyam, please try to
I would like,
conclude.
Yes.
I would like to sum up this and thank you.
Bone modifier ADT recommended ADT induced toxicity in hormone sensitive. The only recommendation.
Yes. So I would like to thank all our panelists for this wonderful panel discussion. And now I would like to hand over to Sarthak, please.
Thank you so much.
So the topic of panel discussion today is role of radiation therapy to prostate in oligometastatic prostate cancer. So should we offer radiation to prostate or should we not offer radiation to prostate? That's going to be the panel topic of discussion today. So I'll move on to my esteemed panel. So I have a very esteemed panel of 10 very vibrant radiation oncologists from India. Dr. Anu Tiwari, Dr. Anurita Srivastav, Dr. Arun Agarwal from Hisar, Dr. Arun Verma from Max Padpadganj, Dr. Dinesh Singh from Max Vaishali, Delhi, Dr. Kuldeep from Venkatesh Hospital, Dr. Narendra Balla, I'm not sure if he's here, Dr. Rashi Agarwal from Maths, Dr. Robin Khosa from Apollo, and Dr. Vipul Nautiyal. So the case that we are going to discuss today is a 75-year-old male with good KPS, disease localized to prostate with serum PSA of 50 nanogram per ml, Gleason score 7 with asymptomatic solitary vertebral metastasis on imaging. Role of RT to prostate. So I would like a quick opinion poll from all, one by one, please. Dr. Ashi.
Yeah.
Dr. Ashi. Hello. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, you are audible.
Yeah,
ma'am, I think there's a problem with the others.
Okay. Dr. Kuldeep.
Yeah. Good evening, ma'am. Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me, ma'am?
Yes, please.
Okay. So in this case, as per the available information, this patient belongs to...
Short answer, Dr. Kuldeep. Just one answer.
Okay, one answer. Okay, I would, yes, consider radiotherapy to the prostate in this case.
Okay,
Yes.
Dr. Bhalla. Dr. Dinesh Singh, please.
Yeah, definitely we should be considering radiation to the prostate in this case.
Okay, Dr. Arun Verma.
Yes, ma'am. We also agree it is a good. Yes, I will consider for RT to both prostate and as well as bony met. Yeah.
As well as to bony met. Okay.
Yeah.
Dr. Arun Agarwal. Dr. Arun. Dr. Arunita.
Yeah, good evening, Dr. Indu.
Yeah.
Yes, for RT.
Okay, and Dr. Anu Tiwari.
I would like to evaluate further whether this prostate cancer is causing any problem to the patient.
Myself, Dr.
If there is no issue related with prostate and it doesn't cause any
voice.
I think someone else is speaking. So I don't think I will give straight away RT to the prostate in this patient.
Okay, let's move to the next question. So in a patient with CA prostate oligometastatic setting, I think these all are the options. If you I'll just read them for you. ADT alone, ADT plus docetaxel, ADT plus abiraterone or enzalutamide, ADT plus RT to prostate and metastatic site, ADT plus RT to prostate only, ADT plus RT only to metastatic site, RT only to both primary and metastasis. I don't think any one of us will do that. And there are so many unanswered questions as well. That is conventional RT versus SBRT to both. And what would be the dose and volumes? And timing, duration of ADT, intermittent or continuous. So we'll discuss all these questions one by one. So if we see the natural history of prostate cancer, we know that from a preclinical phase, there is a primary curative intent treatment phase. And then there is a localized PSA relapse, which is a primary salvage treatment. And there is a time period when it's an oligometastatic disease, which is between locally advanced and a polymetastatic disease, and then polymetastatic disease, and then first line subsequent treatments and terminal event. The problem is oligometastatic prostate cancer still has not been morphologically, immunohistochemically or genomically characterized. And this group of patients remains stratified simply under a clinical concept with unpredictable prognosis, and treatment has yet not been established. So I will not go into these details, but we know that if there is only lymph node metastasis, then overall survival is 43 months, only bone 24 months, visceral only 16 months, and bone plus visceral 14 months. And oligometastatic prostate cancer constitutes 20% of all metastatic prostate cancers. So at 2020 Advanced Prostate Cancer Consensus Conference, 66% panelists voted for the presence of up to 3 mets as oligomets, 20% up to 5 mets, and 14% up to 2 mets. So there is a lot of controversy on this. So Dr. Rashi, I would like you to tell, should oligometastasis be considered a curative clinical stage?
Yes, Dr. Indu, I think so. Because of, I think, availability of PSMA PET and all these scans, we are not now able to diagnose this oligometastatic state at very early time. So if we think, yes, PSMA PET is done and patient, as you have already explained, in that patient, 75 years patient, KPS was good. So we should try to actually eradicate all the disease. We should try.
Okay. Okay, so this is the evolution of oligometastasis. So there have been different theories, starting from Stephen Paget, 1889, which said that circulating tumor cells would seed to an amenable soil, suggesting that metastasis was not a matter of chance. In fact, it is presumed that when the cancer sets in, at the same time from the primary site, the soil is set for a metastasis. So that is why it's very, very important to control the seed or the primary site so that you can control the metastatic site as well. So these are different theories from Halsted, Fisher, spectrum theory, and Hellman Hellman said that oligometastatic state is an intermediate state between limited primary cancer and polymetastatic cancer, in which local therapy for metastatic lesions results in satisfactory survival, which is comparable to a non-metastatic disease. So now I want to ask Dr. Dinesh Singh and Dr. Narendra Bhalla. So this being a metastatic disease, would you consider ADT in this particular patient? If yes, for how long? Or not at all? And is ADT necessary for oligometastatic hormone-sensitive prostate cancer? Is the addition of docetaxel to hormone therapy recommended for patients with oligometastatic hormone-sensitive prostate cancer? And is addition of abiraterone plus low-dose prednisolone to ADT recommended? Dr. Dinesh Singh.
Well, I will say that ADT is definitely necessary for oligometastatic disease because it is leading to increased in overall survival of these patients. And there was a Enzamet and Titan trials. They found a survival benefit when the use of enzalutamide and epatolamide was used in both high volume and low volume diseases. And if we talk of ADT plus or minus abiraterone, then this was studied in the STEMPEDE trial. And in this, definite advantage was seen in both high volume and low volume diseases. And when we look at the CHARTED trial, they found benefit of ADT plus or minus chemo only in high volume diseases. So definitely ADT should be added in this patient. And regarding the duration of ADT, there is no clear-cut evidence that how much duration is the adequate duration. But usually in my practice, I go for 2 to 3 years of ADT in these patients if they are tolerating without much side effects.
Dr. Bhalla, is Dr. Bhalla there? Dr. Bhalla? No. Dr. Anurita, I would like to ask you, in this particular patient, would you straight away start with radiation, or you will give ADT for some time and then take the patient for RT, or you will do both the things simultaneously? What would be your approach, Dr. Anurita?
Because we don't have the information about was the patient having any obstructive symptoms or not, so I'm presuming that they were not there. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So in such a scenario, what I would be doing, I would first start with a trial of ADT, give it for around 3 months, and then go for radiation to the local site. And because it's an asymptomatic mets also, so that needs to be also taken care with radiotherapy. So first ADT followed by radiation.
So Dr. Anurita would like to give it for 3 months. And for how long you will continue, Dr. Anurita?
The ADT?
Yeah.
Yeah. So as like, I think sir has already answered that, because we don't have any specific specified protocol, whether it is 2 years versus 3 years, or you want to continue it for even further. given this scenario, I think 3 years would be an optimal time, and then we can go back and monitor the PSA level. In case there is a subsequent rise, you can always come back and re-challenge the patient again.
Dr. Robin, would your approach be a little different or the same?
Thank you, ma'am, for giving me an opportunity. ADT certainly is an option. Regarding the question of timing of starting of ADT, should it be prior to radiation or after it or concurrent? I think starting prior to your radiation therapy or concurrent, both will suffice if your oligometastatic burden is pretty low and your prostate size is also manageable, patients not having too many symptoms. And in this case, obviously, I will prefer to add abiraterone as well. In this case, it's a low burden oligometastatic, and with the current evidence, I do think that addition of abiraterone will help this patient. Until when to continue ADT is again a controversial thing in my practice. Whatever we say, it's an oligometastatic, but I'll prefer to continue ADT till progress, till the patient is sensitive, rather than stopping at 2 to 3 years, because we don't have any evidence to prove that we need to start when to stop in such cases, provided the patient is tolerating them well.
So you would be comfortable doing radiation and ADT both together. Dr. Anurita would like to give ADT for 3 months. I would take one more opinion from Dr. Anu Tiwari. Dr. Anu.
Yes, I would like to, give hormone therapy first and followed by radiotherapy.
For how long?
It's the same as Robin said. We don't have any evidence to stop it at 3 years or any time, because
will you start radiation straight away, or you would give ADT for some time, say 3 months or 6 months?
I'll give ADT first, and then if there is no response or if there is increase in PSA, I will shift that patient to radiation.
So you, both of you would be happy to do both ADT and abiraterone continued indefinitely and add radiation. Okay, yes. So we don't have any clear answer. So this is the problem. Dr. Dinesh Singh, he has already told. Okay, so next, we don't have a clear-cut answer, but I think Dr. Arun Verma, I would just have your opinion as well on this. Dr. Arun.
Yeah, I just want to add, though there is no guidelines to stop it, as per metastasis, as per guideline, we have to continue ADT till progression. But there is a data of intermittent ADT. If the PSA level is less than 4, then we can stop, and then it start rising, then we again start.
The first question is, when will you start ADT? I mean, when will you start radiation? You will start radiation straight away, give a trial of ADT for 6 months and start radiation. This is my question.
There is no data about sequencing in oligometastatic, but STAMPEDE trial, most of cases, the ADT started and radiation is checked later on. So we follow that. We start ADT, and as maybe 1 month, 2 months, depending upon the, if it is intermediate risk prostate disease, then we may start upfront. If it is a bulky prostate, then, yeah.
Ma'am, can I add one point?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, Dr. Kuldeep.
Yeah, I think one extra benefit of starting with ADT before radiation is that you can know the sensitivity of the metastatic lesions. And suppose if there are 3 lesions or 5 lesions in oligometastatic, then
one metastasis.
In one metastasis also, if you get very good response at 3 months, you may at that time may decide to defer radiation to the metastatic site, and you can just continue with radiation to the primary site at that point of time. So that gives you one extra benefit of triaging or knowing the sensitivity of overall disease, especially in a 75-year-old patient where you would not want to treat all the sites together. That is my
So we have all different opinions. So let's move to the next question. what is the most commonly accepted definition for oligometastatic prostate cancer? Dr. Arun, please. Dr. Arun Agarwal.
Yeah, good evening all. Most accepted, in my view, most accepted definition for oligometastatic in prostate cancer is anything is metastasis in five places is the most accepted definition for oligometastatic. If prostate is metastasis to 5 places, it may be in the same organ or it may be in the different places.
So 5 or less. Dr. Dinesh, sir?
Yeah.
Well, while going through the literature, I have come across that many people, they have taken 3 as the cutoff for oligometastatic, and others have taken 5 as the cutoff for this. So in this, we'll have to consider the patient as a whole, like the age, performance status, the tumor burden in each of the metastatic site, and then accordingly we can take a call whether to take the patient for a curative treatment considering oligometastatic or to take for the palliative.
So I came across this recent publication. So in prostate studies also, there is no definite cutoff. Some people have taken it as less than or equal to 5. Some people have taken less than or equal to 3 bone or lymph nodes. Some have taken even less than 1 lymph node in one study. And in fact, in one article, up to 10 metastasis bone, they are taking as oligometastasis. So it's still a very gray area, but I think 3 to 5 is something which is acceptable. And I think it also depends on which modality you are using to screen for your oligometastatic. What is your modality to check? So I'll move to that question. So actually, we have to see whether there is a difference between oligometastasis and oligorecurrence. In oligometastasis, there is primary is also active and the distant mets are also active. While in oligorecurrence, there is a controlled primary and the distant metastasis is active. So there are so many definitions of a oligometastasis. One is oligometastasis that metastasis from tumors early in the chain of progression and facility for metastatic growth has not been fully developed and the site for growth is restricted. Some people say solitary or few detectable metastatic lesions that are usually confined to a single organ. Oligometastasis is that due to limited metastatic competence and does not occur following otherwise successful systemic treatment. So there are a lot of definitions. And induced oligometastasis is after you have given systemic chemotherapy and most of the metastases have disappeared, but only 1 or 2 are left which are not assessed by chemotherapy. Oligorecurrence is limited metastasis in the presence of a controlled primary. Synchronous oligometastasis is less than 5 metastatic or recurrent lesions in the presence of active primary. Synchronous oligometastasis is oligometastatic disease detected at the time of diagnosis of primary, so active primary, metachronous, and oligoprogression. So oligoprogression is progression of limited number of metastatic deposits while remaining metastases are controlled with systemic therapy. So we have to understand all these differences.
Ma'am, can I add one point?
Yes, please.
Okay, I was just seeing one definition, and in that, one important point was that the number, apart from the number, it is also very important that all the metastases should be treatable. So because the oligometastatic concept started with treating the patient in a radical manner. So if you are not able to treat, even there are 2 metastases, but they are not treatable because they are too huge or something, then it does not qualify for oligometastasis. So it seems quite logical. So I think this point should be considered while formulating future definitions.
Great thought.
I think this will be covered in the volume of the disease, whether it is a high volume disease or a low volume disease. With the
Doctor, that's a different concept. So he's talking about that if you're not able to target the metastasis by a local modality. This is what he's saying. So I would like to ask Dr. Arunita, how do you define low volume and high volume disease in prostate cancer?
Yeah, actually, this is a very debatable point. There are no specific definitions. If you go by the trials, they all have used different definitions which they have tried to define as. So, for example, you have either 1 to 5 mets or 1 to 3 mets in the appendicular skeleton and up to 4 if one of them is sort of situated not in the appendicular skeleton also is acceptable, or they have even limited up to 1 to 3 mets all in the appendicular skeleton. So this point is very much debatable because they are talking about the number of mets and the volume of the disease burden are two very, very different things.
Yeah.
So there is no specific guidelines. If you go by Stampede, then it is up to 5 mets, one in, not one which should not be in the appendicular skeleton. But they have also tried to use this active bone scan index when they have actually come up with that score. I think that really helps you to know about the exact volume of the disease rather than just the number and the location of the metastasis.
So I think low volume disease and high volume disease, they have been differently told. So there are 3 different, I searched for this and I came across this table. So first of all, it was mentioned by Glass et al. And where they said that extensive disease if there is appendicular skeletal metastasis and or visceral mets. But if it's nodal mets and axial mets, it is a low volume. While in charted trial, they said more than or equal to 4 bone metastasis with 1 or more outside the vertebral bodies and pelvic and or visceral metastasis, and all others fall into low volume. So Stampede and Gato AFU 15, they use the charted criteria, while Latitude, they said 2 or more of the following: visceral metastasis, more than 3 bone metastasis, or Gleason score more than 8. So whenever we are defining low volume or high volume disease, we must always mention, are we using charted trial criteria or Latitude criteria or Glass et al. Criteria? Because otherwise it will be very difficult to understand what are we talking about. So now I would talk to Dr. Anu Tiwari, and I would request her to tell me which investigations would you choose to detect oligometastasis? What would be your primary investigations? Dr. Anu, please.
I think in this case, we need to do a bone scan and PSMA scan. But otherwise, depends upon the patient's symptoms and, that's it, because PSMA scan and bone scan are the main 2 investigation I would like to do.
What are the sensitivities for them? I mean, to detect oligomets, because the sensitivity of all these modalities is different. So we have to, we can not define oligometastasis on the basis of just a CT scan or a bone scan. So we might be missing.
PSMA scan, I said. PSMA.
Yeah. So Dr. Arun.
Sorry, ma'am, if you could just please hurry up and probably conclude. We're running out of time. Thank you.
Okay, then I leave it. So basically, I just compiled this table. So CT scan has a sensitivity of 70 to 80%, bone scan 60 to 80%, 11C choline 89%, but if PSA is less than 1, it's less sensitive, 7 to 44%. 18 flu-C chlorine has a 87% sensitivity, but if PSA is less than 1, its sensitivity is 21 to 41%. PSMA PET 86%. And these are the different, so if PSMA PET detects 42% of lesions if the PSA is between 0 to 0.2, if it is more than 0.2 to 0.29, 50% lesions, 0.5 to 1, 75% lesions, 1 to 2, 76% lesions, and more than 2, 95% lesions. Choline PET can detect if it's more than 1.5 PSA, and trust guided biopsy more than 2. For bone scan, it has to be more than 10 PSA. So we will leave the physiological mechanism because in the interest of time. Biomarkers, so I would just say that there is some work going on microRNA profiling and liquid biopsy, which can tell us that which patient is at risk of progression from locally advanced disease to polymetastatic disease. So if the circulating tumor cells are less than 5 per 7.5 ml whole blood at baseline, it may identify oligometastasis. These are some other prognostic indices, which I'm not going to talk about. So this we all know about the HORED trial and Stampede trial. So Dr. Robin, would you like to make a comment on Stampede or HORED trial? So what message did you get from that? Dr. Robin? Dr. Robin?
Dr. Indu, can I comment?
Yes, please, Dr. Rashi.
So both these trials actually very important for us because they tell if the patient is having, as you have already described about oligometastatic disease, if the person is having oligometastatic disease, at that time, if we treat the primary disease, as you have already mentioned, the seed, then we can increase the progression-free survival. So these are the basis to treat oligometastatic disease. By these trials, we can conclude that we can treat the primary disease.
So what is the
can I comment?
Dr. Vipul, sorry,
Yes.
I couldn't see you, so I'm sorry, I should have involved you.
So the Stampede trial had showed the benefit in the overall survival also, the 3-year 8% benefit by treating the primary tumor because it sterilizes the seeding of the distant metastasis. So that's why the reason, the rationale of the treating the local primary tumor site, both the trials have showed the benefit, HORAD as well as the Stampede.
Yeah. So basically in the HORAD trial, they were all de novo, less than 4 bone mets, but just mind you, in HORAD, the high median PSA, it was 142, which is a very high PSA, and the doses of radiation used was 70 gray and 57.6 gray in 19 fraction, which is not an adequate dose. In spite of that, they saw that 3-year overall survival for less than 4 bone metastasis was 77% versus 70%. And the survival curves begin to separate at 2 years with low risk disease, and overall survival was same. So they did not see much difference in overall survival, but if less than 4 bone metastasis, there was some benefit seen. And similarly in Stampede, there was 7% benefit
in the overall survival. But the problem in the HORAD trial, they have given the underdoses to the prostate, 70 gray, 35 fraction.
So Dr.
That would be the reason. That's why there is no benefit in overall survival.
Dr. Vipul, I would like you to comment here. If you have to treat this patient, would you treat only the prostate? Would you treat pelvic lymph nodes as well? What doses would you use?
So in the oligometastatic site, I would prefer to give the only prostate, only RT. I would not increase the doses to the whole pelvis because of the toxicity. And the concept, the basic rationale to give the local tumor site, just decrease the seeding of the tumor to the distant site. Basically, this is decreasing the seeding of the movement. That's only the benefit of this is the biological rationale.
What would be your doses? So you will treat only prostate, and what would be the doses?
55 gray in 20 fraction if we'll treat the hypofractionate EBRT.
I think it's still a lower dose. I mean, I don't know. Dr. Dinesh, sir.
Yes.
How would you like to treat this patient? Only prostate plus pelvic lymph nodes, and the doses?
No, I would like to treat only the prostate and the oligometastatic site and the ADT in this patient. And the dosage will be in the biological equivalent range, about 80 gray equivalent I would like to give.
80 gray. So you treat like a radical case. Okay.
Yeah, I will take it as a curable case. But the volume will be limited to prostate and the oligometastatic site.
Dr. Arun Agarwal, what would you do in this particular patient? Dr. Arun Agarwal?
Yeah, Dr. Indu. I would like to treat this patient as a radical intention. I would like to give the radiation to the prostate and 1 or 2 SBRT doses to the bone metastasis or oligometastatic sites, and no dose to the lymph nodes, or because they may increase the toxicity and all. And doses should be around 70 gray to 80 gray, basically.
80 gray. 80 gray would be too high.
I'm sorry again, but then I think you could just conclude your.
I'll just show one last slide that will clarify this question. So there is basically a new trial for which recruitment is going on. This is an Atlanta trial where they have taken exactly this group of patients and new metastatic prostate cancer. They have done a CT chest, abdomen and pelvis, bone scan, MRI prostate and prostate biopsy. Within 4 months of ADT, they have stratified patients into these 3 groups. So control arm, ADT with docetaxel or enzalutamide or abiraterone, and then local treatment. So they have compared minimally invasive ablative therapy with cryoablation plus minus pelvic lymph node dissection followed by SABR2 oligomets or EBRT plus minus pelvic lymph node radiation. So I'll just show you the doses that have been used. So they have used 60 gray in 20 fractions, prostate to 60 gray, and seminal vesicles 47 gray SIB. And if they were treating pelvic lymph nodes, it's 47 gray in 20 fractions. Or by conventional 74 to 78 gray in 37 to 39 fractions, prostate to 74 to 78, seminal vesicles 60 gray SIB, and pelvic lymph nodes 55 gray. So if I think this trial will give us a lot of answers on what should be the dosing. So I think my only conclusion would be that oligometastatic disease is more than a mirage, and we have to use the right modality to detect oligometastasis. I think PSMA PET scan would give us a lot of answers, and if we can do genetic testing or markers or liquid biopsy, it would give us an answer. It would be the future. And no patient with metastatic disease should be referred only to a medical oncologist, but a radiation oncologist has to be a part in an oligometastatic prostate cancer. So I want to thank all my panelists for an excellent
Can I interrupt? Sorry,
Yeah.
my mouse got hanged, so I couldn't on it. Just want to ask a question. What's the rationale of not adding lymph node radiation in such oligometastatic, since it's a stage which is more than a localized prostate, high-risk prostate cases? What's the rationale behind not using the lymph node area?
So honestly, if you ask me, I would calculate the risk of lymph node involvement by Roche formula, calculate the risk, and if there is a risk of lymph node metastasis, I would definitely like to include, because on one side we are talking about radical treatment, and on the other side we are just treating prostate.
Exactly.
So, and because it's an oligometastatic setting, which is a curable patient. So either we treat the patient full blown, or we don't treat the patient. I mean, I would like to first give ADT, as Dr. Kuldeep also said, for 3 to 6 months, understand the disease biology, understand is the patient truly a oligometastatic case or a progressive case, and do a PSMA PET, see the response, see the PSA velocity, kinetics, and everything. And then if I have to treat the patient, I would be happy to treat the prostate as well as the oligometastatic site, and I would be happy to, depending on Roche formula, I would treat prostate plus pelvic nodes. But of course, these are all gray areas. We don't have one answer. So 10 panelists, all esteemed, and we still, we have more questions than clear answers, I think. But I really want to thank each one of you for such wonderful comments and giving your point of views. Thank you so much, Dr. Sar.